Welcome back to the Women's Health and Fertility Podcast, the show where we explore all things women's health, hormones, and healing, one real conversation at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Tina Yang, and today I am so excited to welcome a guest who has been changing lives and cycles around the world. Her name is Cynthia Donovan, and Donovan's professional experience began after receiving her Bachelor's of Science degree in dietetics from the State University of New York. She went on to complete her dietetic internship, earning her title as a registered dietitian and a Master of Science degree in nutrition. She is a registered and certified dietitian nutritionist as well as a certified health coach. As the founder of Recipe for a Period, Cynthia has had the incredible privilege of helping countless women reclaim their periods. Her passion lies in guiding women to restore their fertility, cultivate a healthy relationship with food and exercise, become stronger than ever, and challenge the misconception that the pill is one size fits all solution for missing periods, despite what many doctors may suggest. Each day, Cynthia feels grateful for the opportunity to empower women to regain their periods, rediscover their fertility, and experience true freedom in their approach to food and fitness. Having faced her own struggles, she is committed to helping others navigate their journeys and avoid the challenges she encountered. She wakes up every morning excited to embrace this meaningful work and support others on their path to health and well being. When she's not supporting women around the world through period recovery, Cynthia can be found with the two loves of her life, her sons Brian and Braden. She loves to adventure, spend time in nature, travel, laugh, and enjoy a good cup of coffee. I first heard about Cynthia through two of my very, very special patients. One of them was struggling with fertility and was diagnosed with PCOS by her reproductive endocrinologist and her OBGYN. And she had felt that she had not been diagnosed properly. She was going through an IVF cycle, and unfortunately, she had an unsuccessful round of IVF. And she decided to take a break between cycles and just kind of work on her overall health and her nutrition, her diet, and just really focus on some self care. So she had been seeing me for acupuncture for quite some time, but she had decided that she wanted to also incorporate nutrition and really take a look at, how she was eating, whether she was nourishing her body properly or not. And she found Cynthia's program, and it made a huge impact on her diet, her lifestyle, and she was able to restore her period and she was able to conceive naturally and have a happy and healthy baby boy. And I've had several patients with Cynthia now since that time, and I'm so excited to have her on my podcast. I'm a huge advocate of nutrition. I believe that nutrition is your first line of medicine, and it can make such a huge impact on your health, wellness, and your fertility, your hormones. And so I'm so excited to have Cynthia on today to talk more about nutrition and the impact that it can have on restoring your menstrual cycle as well as on your fertility. Hi, Cynthia. Welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled to have you today. And I wanted to just jump right in and ask you a couple of questions about your background and what inspired you to be a nutritionist. And I love your IG handle, by the way. The period nutritionist is so clever.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is kind of I'm going to turn a long story short, or it may end up being kind of a long story. But so I'm a registered dietitian and I have been a RD now for it's 15 years this year, which is crazy, which makes me kind of
Congrats.
feel a little bit dated. But, with age and experience comes lots of wisdom. And so, I started out being a dietitian many years ago in the realm of wanting to help people get healthier, which I thought involved weight loss. So I
Hmm.
was working towards that. I was working in the clinical arena as a dietitian. I worked in some community settings as well. And then, oh, excuse me, it's May here in upstate New York, and the pollen is crazy. So I'm sneezing, itchy eyes, all the things. So my apologies if you hear me stop, take a drink a bunch of times.
No
So
worries. We're having
first sneeze
quite
morning.
the allergy season as well here in Southern
Hmm.
California. So,
Yeah. So I did all the, I guess, the typical dietitian stuff, and it was, I can't remember the date, but I had gotten married somewhere around 2011, and I came off the pill. I was put on the pill when I was younger, around 15 years old, because my menstrual cycle was off. I had painful periods or cysts. I don't know, whatever it was. I wasn't paying attention. I was a kid. I had nothing. All the doctor told my mom, like, put her on the pill and like everything will be good. And it was great. And so I came off the pill and I was like, "Oh, where's my period?" I'm like, "Okay." Well, doctors told me it was normal, or wait 3 to 6 months, which I'm
mhm.
gonna side note is a crock of you know what. And so then I was like, "Huh, all right." And then I sought for answers. I'm like, "Well, why? Like, this is not normal. I know this isn't normal." Even though doctors were telling me it was like normal, I knew in my
Mhm.
heart of hearts, and I knew in my heart of hearts, if I wanted to have babies, I wouldn't be able to. And so they assured me, "Don't worry, that you can just do fertility treatment when you're
Mhm.
ready." And I'm like, "But why is my period missing?" So anyway, flash forward after almost 5 years of trying to figure out what was going on with me with a PCOS misdiagnosis, which is a super commonality with women that
Yes.
have hypothalamic amenorrhea, which I had. Finally found a doctor, a reproductive endocrinologist, that said, "Oh, Cynthia, you have hypothalamic amenorrhea." I'm like, "No way." I'm like, "That I learned about that in college in my medical nutrition therapy course. You have to have an eating disorder. You have to be an athlete and have like a what's called red S. You have to have a low BMI." And I'm like, "Well, I don't meet any of these criteria." However, side note, I was training like an athlete and I was not
Mhm.
eating like an athlete. So when I figured that out and I actually believed the doctor, because here I was 5 years looking for answers, and I finally
Sure.
got one and it wasn't the answer I wanted,
Right.
because the doctor told me, like, "Cynthia, you need to eat more and you need to not work out as much." And I'm like, "Huh?" Like, no, like
It seems
that's,
counterintuitive in your brain, right?
yeah,
Yes.
totally. I'm like, no,
Mhm.
like working out all the time is healthy. Eating
Mhm.
X calories and lots of veggies is healthy. Like, no, 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 this doesn't make sense. And long story short, I came to terms with that and what I had to do. And then I decided, well, I don't want to say I decided. I was on another podcast recording with Lisa Hendrickson Jack, who wrote the book, The Fifth Vital Sign. She was like, "Cynthia, you didn't get impatient. You spent almost 5 years." So I decided to pursue fertility treatment, because at that time, this was 10 years ago, there
Mhm.
wasn't conclusivity out there of saying, like, if you get enough food and nourishment for your body, get enough rest, your period's going to return, your fertility is going to return. So I pursued fertility treatment. And after 2 rounds, it took me 2 rounds, because I still didn't have my body in quite the place it needed to be to even accept the fertility treatment,
Sure.
because fertility treatment isn't the what do you call it? The magic fix
It's
or
not the
always
end all be
guaranteed.
all, right? Like IVF
Hmm.
or IUI, for sure.
Yeah. So I pursued IUI. I got pregnant in my third round, and after I had my son, I'm like, this is like a thing. Like,
Mhm.
what just happened? And I ended up getting pregnant with my son, my second son, 15 or 16 months postpartum, when my period returned naturally. So I didn't have a period
Nice.
for I don't know how many years. But then it was my sister-in-law that was like, "Cynthia," and I also helped her work through her hypothalamic amenorrhea and get pregnant as well. And she's like, "Why don't you specialize in this?" And I'm like, "You know what? If I struggled for almost 5 years, and this was however many years ago, there's got to be a ton of women out there that need this clarification so they can not spend that much time and get the answers they
Absolutely.
need to be
Mhm.
fertile, to have the babies, or just to live a full free life around food." So that's,
Mhm.
like, in a nutshell, how I got into this work. And it's been, gosh, over 5 years now since I have helped hundreds of women across the world either conceive or get their cycles back naturally.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I do hear similar stories time and time again from women that maybe have not the correct diagnosis. I feel like
Mm,
PCOS tends to be mixed up with HA or hypothalamic amenorrhea quite a bit. So, and just to kind of dial back a little bit, would you be able to share with us a little bit about the diagnosis of hypothalamic amenorrhea?
Yes, yes. So it is actually a diagnosis of exclusion. So we need to rule out the PCOS. We need to rule
Mhm.
out any pituitary abnormality or anything else that could be going on. But at the same time, women with hypothalamic amenorrhea have pretty distinct characteristics.
Okay.
And if you want, I can share a little bit about that.
Yes,
But
I'd love that.
the I do want to just touch upon the PCOS thing because
Hmm?
it's common because and it happened to me. You go to the doctors, they do the lab test, they do the ultrasound, they kind of go through their, checklist of stuff, and they go and do an ultrasound and they're like, oh my gosh, look at all these cysts. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, like look at all these cysts. When in fact, they are, yes, I guess you can technically classify them as cysts, but they're really follicles. So
Hmm.
every month, a woman grows follicles that mature, and you ovulate, and then you have a luteal phase, and the whole kind of cycle repeats. Now, with women with HA, we have no FSH and LH because that's being produced by the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is shut down because there's not enough food, there's not enough rest, the body is under a lot of stress. So
Right.
doctors automatically see these follicles, which they call cysts, and they're like, oh, there it is. But
That's
these
right.
follicles cannot progress to the next stage in the cycle because the hypothalamus is, laying dormant. So that's where I think there's a big confusion around it. They just see that, there's other criteria that people need to put in place, and one other criteria is that missing or irregular periods, which
Hmm.
you see that in an ultrasound, and you hear a woman has a missing period, they're like, oh, PCOS. So like
That's right.
it fits the diagnostic criteria.
For sure.
Hopefully that will change and there will be better diagnostic criteria, but we need more research on HA. Right now, I think there's, gosh, I got to look at the exact numbers, but there's probably 8 times the amount of research on PCOS. I think thousands of research studies compared to just like a few hundred of HA of original publications. So that just kind of goes to show you. And so the PCOS thing is a big thing. And then women find out they have PCOS, or they supposedly do, and they go on this train of like dieting more or
Yes.
exercising
Right.
more, which sends
Hmm.
them deeper into the HA. So I'm going to talk about some kind of common behavioral characteristics of HA and some physiological stuff that might say like, oh yeah, this definitely sounds more like me. So one of the biggest ones is regular exercise. And so when I say regular exercise, so many women are like, I don't exercise much. Like I'm going to the gym almost every day, 5 days a week. And I like to say this is, I guess, regular, right? But what's regular to you and what's regular to your body? If your period's missing, there's no regularness there. There's lots of irregularity. So if you're not
Hmm.
having any rest days, or you feel guilty if your exercise isn't done, or you're choosing exercise over most things in your life, or counting exercise only if it's intense, or you're, breaking a sweat. And, also though, I want to say you could have HA and not be doing any exercise at all. So,
Hmm.
so the healthy eating, quote unquote, healthy eating, limiting calories or portions, or controlling or macro counting, or only eating at certain times, or only allowing yourself. I was just speaking with a client, which this is a common thing and something I struggled with. She's like, I can only have certain foods on the weekend and only certain foods during the week. Like
Hmm.
these foods I need to save for the weekend because, it's the weekend. I can allow myself to be more free.
Right.
So
Right.
if you're basing meals on like past meals or current meals, or you're just
Hmm.
completely fixated on
Yeah.
food, that's a
Right.
big red flag. And if you're avoiding social situations, you're
Hmm.
avoiding maybe certain food groups, or you are avoiding gluten because you heard it's bad for you, or whatever it may be.
Sure.
So, the physical side of it, uh, you may have normal labs. I just want to point that out there, and that's where a lot of women will get hung up too. She's like, oh, well, my labs are normal. My doctor said my labs are normal, but a missing period isn't normal. And
Yeah.
these normal
Exactly.
labs come from, there's ranges. in a woman's like hormone panels where it says follicular, it says luteal, I think it says menstrual phase, and it could vary. So they give you ranges for each part of your menstrual cycle. And if you're in a certain part of your menstrual cycle, your labs are going to be normal. But like I said about the ultrasound, many women are stuck in this follicular phase because they can't progress throughout the menstrual cycle because they don't have the proper hormones because our hypothalamus is lying dormant or shut down, if you will. So they will appear normal because that's one of the markers of that particular part of your cycle, if that makes sense. But they're not normal. Like no labs are normal if your period's missing or irregular. And also, lab work is a snapshot in time. So sometimes you'll have normal labs. Sometimes you will have low LH or FSH or low estrogen,
Mhm.
low progesterone, a thin uterine lining, polycystic appearing ovaries, no
Sure.
cervical mucus or
Hmm.
very little. Undiagnosed infertility is a big one that we see. It's like, well, we can't figure out. No libido.
Hmm.
So sometimes you'll get a bleed off of progesterone. A lot of times doctors will say, hey, try Provera challenge or
Right.
progesterone challenge,
Right.
see if you get a bleed. Whether or not you get a bleed, you, you likely still have HA because once you remove that progesterone, the bleeding is likely not going to be there anymore. And some women will say, well, it kickstarted my cycle. It,
Yeah.
it doesn't kickstart. Now,
No.
if you are working towards recovery, eating more and better, resting more, and also you had taken progesterone, and then the following month you get a period, it's the lifestyle changes you're implementing, not the progesterone that kickstarted anything.
Absolutely. Well, it's
So,
just a withdrawal bleed from,
exactly.
being on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
progesterone that creates
Yeah.
a thicker lining and then getting off of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and so that's kind of it in a nutshell. And then most of these women are type A, high strung, anxiety,
mhm.
easily stressed out, body image stuff going on. So, and I can speak to all that because those are the women I work with, and that's who I was in the past.
Yeah, and I think the way I found you, Cynthia, was through some of our mutual patients,
Hmm.
like I mentioned, and I think that both of those patients were probably, well, actually, they were diagnosed improperly with PCOS, and I think because PCOS is such a common diagnosis for infertility, that it's a quick, it must be this, and
Yeah.
like what you said, all of the markers lining up, the ultrasound, the antral follicle count when they go in and do the day 2 or day 3 ultrasound, and they see all these cysts or follicles, and then the no period and yeah, the lack of a period. So I think that it's so great that you kind of uncover these things and being able to understand your body and understand, your status of hormones is so important. So thank you for sharing that these are some of the things to look at. And
Yeah.
I do see a commonality between some of my HA patients. Like you said, they're usually really successful, highly
Mm.
driven, usually in really good shape. They love to cook healthy foods and they're
Yes.
really into healthy eating, which is great and it's fantastic. But I do think, they're usually on the leaner side and
Mm.
their body fat's usually lower.
Mm.
So I would love to ask you, when you meet with your patients, your clients, is there anything that you recommend for them to help them distinguish and differentiate between HA and anything else that perhaps they may have been diagnosed by their OBGYN or by their reproductive endocrinologist?
Absolutely. And I do want to say I linked in the, not in the, well, hopefully you can put it in the show notes
Yes, I will.
where there is a little, I like to call it, I think I called it a fact sheet. But, anyways, it
Mhm.
kind of goes through the diagnostics of HA, and it's a sheet that you could bring with you to your doctor and hopefully be like,
Wonderful.
here, or like,
Yes.
no, or be able to advocate for yourself.
Yes,
Because I
exactly.
think before I even answer that question, it very much so like we go to our medical professionals, mostly doctors, because that's the first, as soon as we have a kind of a period problem, we're like, okay, OBGYN, like, or OB, I'm going there, right?
Mhm.
And so then you go there and they're like, "Oh, no, you're fine. Labs are fine." But deep down inside, like, it's not fine, or maybe you've learned a little bit about stuff. And sometimes you may not feel comfortable speaking up.
Hmm.
But I just want to say advocation, especially in this like world now, and even 10 years ago when I was going through it, is super important. You know your body better than
Right.
anybody else. So don't, if your doctor won't work with you or listen to you, I think
You might
it's
need to get a second opinion.
yes. And
Yes.
and if that second
Right.
opinion, because oh my gosh, I've had women say, "Well, I've got second opinions, I got third opinions, I got fourth opinions. Nobody has told me what you told me." And I'm like, "I'm so
Hmm.
sorry. I am so sorry." But at the end of the day, something led you to me. Your intuition of knowing that there's more to the story than what
Right.
the medical professional perceives. And there's nothing against doctors for not knowing about it. There's not a lot of research out there. So if there's not a lot of research, it's not getting into the medical teachings, and the
Right.
doctors aren't going to know about it.
Hmm.
So, and that's why advocacy and awareness of this and doing podcasts and like spreading stuff on social media is just so important, so you can become a better advocate of yourself. So that will be linked hopefully in the show notes,
Yes,
and
I'll definitely
you could
link that.
download that, bring it to your doctors, or just have it so you're like, okay, like I feel like I have some validation here.
That's right.
So, and
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you now, going back to what was your initial question after I went on that kind of tangent?
Oh, well, I think that that questionnaire is very helpful because my question
Yeah.
was about how would a patient distinguish, right,
Hmm.
between HA and a potential other diagnosis that they may have been given. And I think having that list of questions to kind of ask your OBGYN, or maybe even like these tests haven't been done, or looking at other areas of your cycle, or even maybe, and I hate to say this, but I think it's true. I don't think enough emphasis is placed on diet and lifestyle in Western
No.
medicine. And it probably doesn't even come up in conversation at all. Like, oh, are you restricting your calories, or are you on
Yeah.
a special diet? Or I have never had that question asked by my OB. The only time I've ever had a diet question asked was around potential gestational diabetes. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And here's the thing too. So like one of the things in the fact sheet that I will share, it's like, has your doctor asked you about your
mhm,
eating? Has your doctor asked
mhm,
you about your exercising? And they may have. And you may say, "Well, I eat really healthy, vegetables." And you're at this normal weight where maybe you're got a little muscle on you and you just look like the quote unquote normal healthy woman, right? But your doctor may say, "Okay, well, she looks fine,
mhm.
and she told me about her exercise. Well, she's working out 7 days a week, but she looks healthy."
Right,
There's a big weight bias where we think somebody on the thinner looking side is automatically healthy. And that's for various reasons, but sometimes our professionals have their own internal bias of what health looks like,
right.
right?
It's
And
true.
so they may not even have the tools to say like, "Oh, yeah, she's normal weight, she's working out all this time," and not be able to make that connection of, "Huh, like maybe this is not enough food for her body for as much as
Right.
she's working
And
out."
maybe this is
So,
contributing to the irregular or
yeah.
absence of a menstrual cycle.
Yeah. And that holds women back a lot of times because they're like, "Oh, my doctor said I was fine. Keep
Yeah,
doing what
and
I'm doing."
totally. And I think that there's this trend that and not only women that are trying to get pregnant, but even I hope the younger women that may not be ready to enter motherhood yet, but
Mm,
they're noticing that their cycles are irregular or sometimes not happening at all, that they can gain some insight from our conversation too, to
mm,
start thinking about it earlier
yeah.
than later, and it not being something to really pay attention to only when you are ready to start a family, because
Yes.
this can be something that's going on, like what you said, for yourself for a while. But again, when you go to your well woman exam every year, everything looks great. The doctor's like, oh, you're healthy, you're fit. Okay, great, and send you along your way.
Mhm.
But like you said, not having a period is not normal. So that definitely needs to be addressed in so many ways. It's so important. And I think
Yeah.
in Chinese medicine, we really look at the cycle in phases. And so we look for certain things during the follicular phase, during the ovulatory phase, during the luteal phase. And I think a lot of our patients that come to see us, they perhaps haven't found answers in the Western medical model. And I'm
Mm.
sure, like for you too, when your patients come to see you, they're looking for more. And their intuition says, no, this isn't right.
Mm.
There's got to be something else that I can do to reset my body and, kind of activate that HPO axis again so that I can cycle again. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually, when I was diagnosed with PCOS or misdiagnosed with PCOS, I
Hmm.
started acupuncture.
Oh, okay.
And
Great.
yeah, and I was like, okay, because I heard like this is gonna help, it's gonna regulate my cycle. And I saw all these things like, oh, if I take this supplement along with acupuncture, like this is gonna bring my cycle back. It didn't, right?
Oh,
And I don't want to say like acupuncture was not beneficial, but until I combined it with proper
right.
nourishment,
Yes.
because that nothing, I like to say, at least in my experience, will never replace if your body's undernourished and it's already under baseline stress because of that, and maybe you're over exercising or maybe you're not. That's like the foundation.
Totally.
Like,
That's the root. Yeah.
yes, yes,
And
yes, that
nutrition is your
nourishment.
first line of medicine always. And
Yes.
so I totally agree with that. I think acupuncture is very beneficial for stress reduction, definitely
Oh, I
decreasing
loved it.
cortisol levels. And
So
so being able to
relaxing.
combine that with proper nutrition, I think is so important and is vital to
Yeah.
restoring your hormones for women. So I love the
Yes.
combination of it. And, I have
Hmm.
so many questions.
Combination.
Yeah, I have so many questions about nutrition. And I know every person is different.
Hmm.
But do you find that there's certain nutrients or certain foods that are more important during certain phases of your menstrual cycle?
So I like to say, there's no, and of course there might be specifics and everybody is different, but for the woman who is, say, missing her period and then gets her period back, first I want to talk about if you're missing your period,
Mm-hmm.
the right kinds of food and the right amounts of foods and the right frequency of foods is going to be essential in restoring your menstrual cycle. So the the common guidelines of getting your period back is eat more, rest more. And all
Mm-hmm.
while that is like some general guidance, but it's if you told me just eat more back in the day, I probably would be like, okay, I'm just gonna eat a shit ton more vegetables. I'm
Right.
gonna I'm gonna have like,
Y-
all the healthy foods. And I'm
Sure.
not saying go out and eat McDonald's every day,
Mm-hmm.
but making sure you're having adequate carbs. A lot of people in general nowadays are afraid of carbs. Like
That's
carbs are
right.
the enemy. It used to be
Yeah.
fat. Now it's carbs. It'll probably go back to fat one day. I don't know.
There's always a trend, right?
But protein has been a pretty
Mm-hmm.
safe food,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of throughout the decades. And so they'll come in with lots of veggies, lots of protein. And even to this day, I hear from women, well, I've increased my protein intake. And it's yes, you need some protein, but you also need the carbohydrates and the fats. And as far as the
Mm-hmm.
micronutrition that comes from vegetables, where you said, okay, is there any specific foods? And it's like that micronutrition that comes from the veggies, the vitamins, and the minerals, if we're not getting proper macronutrients, the carbs, the fats, and the protein, like our body's doing nothing with those things,
Right. That's
you
a good point.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's starting there. If you truly love vegetables for their health benefits, we need to focus on the bigger picture first, the macronutrients. So, and of course they work hand in hand, but if we don't have that macro level stuff, it's going to be hard to accept our body to accept that micro. So adequate carbs and fats, I see that as lacking in most women I work with. And so it's adding more of those in and making sure those carbs that you're not like, okay, well, yeah, Cynthia, I'm going to add more carbs, that it's just going to be quinoa. It's going to be all this high fiber stuff. So we want to be careful of fiber intake during HA. And a lot of times it's like, well, fiber's healthy. Like fiber impacts, taking the hit from the blood sugar, from the carbohydrates. Right now, our bodies need as much fast, quick carbs as it can. And so eventually we can go back to eating, I don't want to say normal, because what is normal?
Sure.
but where you're not having to be so intentional with
Mm,
your food. And so I like to say after you're getting proper macronutrients, you're eating frequently throughout the day, you are giving yourself freedom of if you want pizza tonight, have the darn pizza.
mhm.
If your husband is like, let's go out for ice cream tonight, go out for the ice cream. There's being so fixated with food is not healthy either. And if, we're worried about fertility, if we don't have enough food, enough energy, nothing else like matters. We can obsess and think about food all day. So, thinking about that, I also encourage women to limit caffeine during recovery for a couple of
Mhm.
reasons. One being sometimes it could be an appetite suppressant.
Mhm.
Most times it can increase cortisol levels, and most women are have elevated cortisol levels.
Sure.
Most women
Yeah.
are drinking caffeine in the morning,
Mhm.
and so it's like a double whammy. So, and I'm trying to think what else. Those I would say are the general guidelines, and then it's going to vary from woman to woman. Of what her activity levels are. What does she do for a living? Where does she live? What's the climate? So there's a lot of individualization when it comes to that based on, so many different factors. And then after period recovery, because that's a big like, well, am I going to eat this way forever? And the question is, what's your next goal after getting your period back? You have to maintain that period, right? It's not just a
Mhm.
one and done deal. Do you want to get pregnant? Do you want to go on to run marathons? So it's going to be your nutrition will vary for whatever next phase that you're planning on doing. So
Sure.
I wish I could say concretely, but every woman is different.
Well, I think it's true in anything, any type of treatment, that customization tailored for you in whatever
Hmm.
phase of life you're in is key. I do have a question about when patients come to you. I know this is a tough thing to answer, but
Hmm.
how long does it normally take for them to get a period if they haven't cycled for 6 months plus, let's say?
Yeah, it is. Gosh, it's so variable. I can tell you I did an average maybe 6 months ago, and
Hmm.
women averaged about 8 to 10 weeks in my coaching program. There is a book called No Period Now What by Dr. Nicola Sykes, which is a really great book. And I think she says in her average, and that's by them kind of following her kind of protocol of eating X amount of calories and cutting out all exercise. I believe she quotes 6 months.
Okay,
So it varies. And here's the thing too. Oh, my period's been missing for 20 years. It doesn't mean it's going to take 20 years to get it back.
that's right.
Oh, my period. Yeah. Oh,
Thankfully,
my.
right?
Yes. Yeah. So there's no correlation, at least I found
Hmm.
in my practice, that if your
Hmm.
period's been missing for this long, it's going to take this long to get it back. Or if you're, this weight, there's some women out there that don't ever lose their periods despite being a low body weight, despite having an eating
Hmm.
disorder.
Right.
So that's why, again, it gets so individualized. So, what I do to track progress, because everyone's so different, is that let's look at your hormonal signs. Let's look at what your body is telling us. And then, if we need to make adjustments in nutrition or movement, then we do so. But your body is dictating that. So, and that's how I can help women really start to connect with their bodies to be like, oh, I'm seeing cervical mucus and this is what kind it is. And oh my gosh, like I'm seeing more. And, so that is really the thing. And then I can kind of tell from there, like once we start seeing that egg white cervical mucus, typically it's not too far away,
Sure.
of getting your period back. But, some women decide, and I'm kind of the meet you where you're at
Hmm.
dietitian where if you don't want to give up your exercise entirely, I'm not going to make you do that because I don't want to make you go crazy. But also, I'm not going to be like, yeah, you can train for a marathon and get your period back. Of course, like that'll happen in
You're
eight
like,
to
I have
10
to set
weeks.
realistic expectations here.
Yeah. So we
Yes.
got to, I just had a client who she kind of took a gradual approach. Like she was CrossFitting X amount of days per week, then she went down, then she went down some more. And then she decided, I'm just going to take a whole week off and see what happens. That's when her body was like, oh, heck yeah. She ovulated and she got a period not too long after that.
Amazing.
So, it does. it varies. So tracking those hormonal signs is a good indication of progress being made. So you're not
Hmm.
like, okay, is this ever going to happen for me?
Right,
And if you're
right.
not sure about what those hormonal signs are, I recommend you working with someone that can guide you and support you in that process.
And test your hormones and see where you're at too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So as far as your program, tell us a little bit about your program and what's involved.
Yeah. So I primarily work in a community format. So I do
Nice.
offer some one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
coaching. However, I did that in the beginning when I started out, and then I started out doing group community coaching, and it was just so much more powerful because we have to think of it. We're living in this world that is doing the opposite of what we're trying to do in period recovery, which is eat more, rest more, potentially have to gain weight, and the rest of the world is eating less, moving more, and fixated on losing weight, right? So it becomes a pretty lonely or isolating thing, and where we don't feel validation in how we're feeling, even with our
Mm-hmm.
partners. Even though so many of the women I work with are like, "Oh my gosh, my partner is so supportive," but they don't get it, right? They don't get why I can't just eat, or that I just saw the scale go up 1 pound and I'm like freaking out. They just don't get it. They're supportive, they're there for me, but they don't get it. So feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling like you're not crazy. I had a client today. She was telling me about how she can only eat certain foods on the weekends and certain foods during the week. And I was like, I was there too. So many of the women I work with there too. It's okay. Wherever those rules came in, I'm not really sure, even for myself. And we don't know where those food
Right.
rules come in, but
Totally.
they come in somehow.
Well,
So
I
we
think, yeah, I think there's this aspect, and you said you hit on something really important. I think earlier you said there's a disconnect sometimes too. And I think that there's an aspect of control, right? And food, diet,
yes.
nutrition, exercise, those are things that we can control. And,
Mm,
when we are ready to try and we're kind of going through the fertility journey, there's so many things that are out of our control. So I think it's
so
easy to
many.
hunker down and be like, what can I control? And then it turns into the things that you're talking about, like the exercise, the food. Oh, I can eat this on the
Hmm.
weekend. I can't eat this on the weekday. And, you know, all
Yeah.
the boundaries that we put on ourselves and the extra stress that I don't even think that we realize that we're putting on ourselves.
No, we're in the pursuit of trying to be our healthiest self for the most
Hmm.
part. And sometimes that means being like in control, right, of our diets or in control of our weight. There's not many women that ever had come to me and was like, "Yeah, I just wanted to lose weight and, be really restrictive with my food for fun." Right? I was just doing
Right?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Just for the heck of it,
Yeah.
right?
I was
Yeah.
doing it in the name of health, but also,
Mhm.
underneath that is the control, you
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
the control piece for sure. So
And
yeah, so we work through that in the program. To I like to say, being in the community, having that validation, being seen, having relatability, being like, oh my gosh, like I just had pizza for the first time. Oh my gosh, me too. Or, oh,
mm,
I'm stressing about I'm in my sister's wedding and I'm scared about my dress not being
yeah.
able to fit. And how
Hmm.
do you work through that? Because if we don't work through those mindset barriers that are coming up, we're not going to be able to get this proper nutrition that our body needs. We're not going to get the rest that our body needs or the right
Totally.
modifications and exercise. So
Hmm.
it's working on that kind of shifting our beliefs to what health really means for us, and all while simultaneously renourishing our body. Or even some women will say, like, I feel like I'm relearning how to eat,
Yes, that is
So
so true because you have spent your whole life restricting things and then now
yeah.
being able to say yes. How nice is
Mhm.
that?
Yes, it is freeing. And, so we work through that through coaching calls, a group community where you're able to post questions every single day. So you're never, ever feeling alone in this process. And that I like to say, the more you share, the more we can unwind what we believe is true, which pretty much isn't true. Like eating certain things on the weekend versus during the week, there should be no reason why we're doing that. But we do for some reason. We have these thoughts in our head.
Hmm.
So it's really unwinding or untangling those while we're working towards renourishment so that you don't only get your period back, you keep your period back. And then I
Nice.
also bring in special guests like body image dietitians, other types of, mindset and things so that we're getting like a holistic or like all like hitting checking all the boxes because
Nice.
I want everyone to not only feel like they're getting their period back, but they're really like living a full, free, alive life again.
Hmm. Sounds like an incredible community you've
Yeah.
developed.
It is. I wake up every day and I'm like, the women I get to work with and have worked with and will work with, it's just, I am overwhelmed with gratitude that I get to do this. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone the path that I had.
Well,
So,
and that's what makes your program so special because you've lived it, you've gone through it, and you're sharing all the things that worked and didn't work for you, and just really being relatable for these
yeah.
women that are joining your group. Now, can women join at any time, or are there like certain time frames or like set weeks or blocks of
So right
weeks?
now, it's whenever. It's as long
Nice.
as there's availability. I make sure the group doesn't get too big because I want it to be close. I want it to be
Hmm.
intimate. I want, like, I had, and I think it was a mutual client, patient of ours. She had met another woman in the program, and I don't know if you saw her friend too, but they became like best of friends. They got pregnant around the same time.
Yes.
Like, I have other women that they have these like side chats over the past couple years that they're still connected. So it's really cool to see women coming together, even in community outside of my community that I have
Yeah,
created.
and just making like lifelong friends.
Yeah.
And I've always seen too, like in the fertility support groups that I've spoken at, it's sort of this like sisterhood that you build and you develop. And
Mm,
sometimes it's hard, I think, to lean on your family and friends because I think a lot of patients feel like I think they're tired of hearing me talk about this.
yeah.
And B,
Hmm.
they're like, well, gosh, they've never really gone through this. And, they had two children pretty easily. And so there's like that, there's no, relatability in that way. So I think having a community to be able to discuss things and run things by them, like, did you try this? Or even like
Yeah.
recipes, I'm sure, right? Like,
Yes.
this is a great recipe for a healthy pizza. I need to get my
Hmm.
carbs in. What else can I eat? So that's
Yeah, and
amazing.
celebrating, like, there was one client of mine, she's like, I just took my Apple Watch off for the first time in however many years. And it's
Wow.
like, yes, this is awesome. She's like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, no, it's a
You
huge
have
deal.
to celebrate those things, these
These
milestones,
little
and
things that your
yeah.
sister may not get or your mom may not get, but it's huge. And feeling that validation, feeling heard, feeling seen, it's just a part of the human experience and will help all these new things that you're learning become so much more a part of you
Mhm.
versus just a temporary thing.
Absolutely. And I was listening to your podcast. You have an amazing podcast.
Thank
Um,
you.
and you had an episode about body image. And I thought, gosh, every woman needs to listen to this podcast.
Yes, not even just the women with the missing periods. 100%.
And
Yeah.
I already forwarded it to a couple people, but I just love how
Thank you.
you and your guest talked about body neutrality and really, you know, we gotta love ourselves, but there's like stages in between. And
Hmm.
even the body neutrality is a huge win and being able to
Yes.
achieve that relationship with yourself is key.
Yes.
Well, so tell
Yes.
us a little bit about your podcast and how people can tune in.
Yes. I want to say that's one of my favorite things to do is podcast. Whether it's like what we're doing now, even though I'm
Mhm.
on your podcast, but also having guests on my podcast. So my podcast is called the Period Recovery Podcast. And I have a lot of special guests on there. I do a lot of client showcases as well, because I
Nice.
really want women to see like it's possible for them too. Because for some reason we think we're the only ones, we're never gonna get our periods back, we're never gonna get pregnant.
Mhm.
Like I felt that way. I'm like, I'm never gonna get pregnant. I'm never gonna be a mom. And here I am, however many years later, and I have two little boys that are 6 and 8. And I'm like, what? How,
Incredible.
when, how did that happen? You
Incredible.
know?
Love
So
that.
in one through fertility treatment, that was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And
Mhm.
then one that kind of happened by oops. And we wanted more kids, but I just didn't think it was that easy. But
Yeah.
when your
Bonus
body is
babies are the
properly
best. I call
yeah.
them bonus babies.
Yes, yes. But
Yes.
when your body is properly nourished, you gotta be careful if you don't want any
Right.
more kids. We did, luckily. So the podcast ranges. I like to speak a lot about body image. I like to speak a lot about movement and exercise and just share stories of women that have went through it. I like to share some personal experiences. And I'm trying to think what else I've had on there uniquely. I had one of my clients' husbands on there to share the
Mm,
perspective of the partner
I love
because
that.
it's sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, like to have I think about me when I was in my days, I'm like I must have been a handful, you know?
It's you're so right about we can't forget about our partners.
hmm Yeah,
And
they're
they're
living
part
it
of the
with us.
journey for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And to see somebody you love so much struggle and you can't really like help them. Maybe you can get them the resources. I can't tell you how many women are like, yeah, my husband found your podcast and found you. Like he told me
That's
sign up
awesome.
immediately.
That's so
So
incredible. I love
I'm
that.
like, yes, yes, because I want like partners, family members. I want this weight to be taken off of their shoulders
Mhm.
and put into something where it's going to create the necessary change that these women need to live a full free life and a fertile life and an athletic life or whatever it is that they're aspiring to do.
Mhm. Well, so this is amazing. Everybody needs to tune into your podcast. And what's the
Thank you.
best way for people to find you?
So I'd say probably Instagram. I mostly live on Instagram. However, the podcast to me, if you want to hear more, of me talking and more kind of long content, because you can only say so much in Instagram posts.
Sure.
But there is a lot of useful information on Instagram. Also, if you download the little fact sheet that we were talking about, that
Mhm.
is a really great way you can get on my email list. And I send out podcast reminders every other week because they come out every other week, and also newsletters and very helpful information that may not be able to be on Instagram because it's, more short stuff that you have to that you're allowed to share. So
Perfect. And what if a patient just wants to maybe schedule like a discovery call or something like that to learn more about your program? Will
yes,
they
yes.
join?
So if you go to my website, periodnutritionist.com, you'll see various links that'll send you to a discovery call. And then if you go to my Instagram, the only link in the bio will be a link to get on a discovery call and both ways. And also you'll see some in my show notes and my podcast as well. And I'll give you a
Perfect.
link as well. But you will see it'll be a questionnaire because I want to help you be able to find out even before we chat if it's a good fit.
Mhm.
So if you should be able to get right through onto my calendar. If not, please shoot me an email and I'd be happy to accommodate.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for this information. Any last
Yes.
words of wisdom that you want to share with women that are on their journey to becoming moms or on their journey to recovering their period, getting their hormones balanced?
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely do. So if you want it, believe it will be true. So there were times for a long time I didn't think I'd become a mom, but you will become a mom. If you give your body the right nourishment, the right rest, the right TLC, the supportive measures, whether it be acupuncture or, vacations to tropical islands or whatever it may be that helps, your nervous system, breath work, yoga, whatever it may be, try that out. And don't forget to live alongside this, if you will, this hiccup or this bump in the road,
Mhm.
because we shouldn't stop living because we're going through something hard, which could be hard to do. We think we got to put all of our focus and time and energy into this one thing to fix it, but you're
Sure.
not broken. You
Mhm.
don't need
Exactly.
fixing.
Yes.
You don't need fixing. You just need a little bit of nourishment, a little bit of rest, maybe a little bit of joy, laughter, fun, play
Mhm.
in your life alongside working through this.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I really appreciate all your time, Cynthia. It was so nice to get to know you and your practice and the work that you do to help so many women. So I can't thank you enough for being on my podcast. And
Yes,
I'll
thank you
make
for
sure,
having me.
yes, you're very welcome. And I'll make sure to share all of the things, access to the questionnaire and information about connecting with you.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
You're welcome. Take care. Thank you.